that a Bohm tenon expander?
No, this is the Paris tenon expander.
Oh, okay.
And then I have the Bohm
And we're live.
shrinker.
Oh yeah, gotcha. Cool, man. And we've got some dog treats over your left shoulder there too.
Yeah, we've got dog treats,
right?
And my dog usually hangs out right down there. That's her blanket.
There you go.
She just went for a walk.
You got to have the dog area.
Doesn't end up barking in the video, and we've got dog toys all around the shop. So you never know when you might step on a squeaky toy.
That's right. So you have a shop. So you're in your shop now, and you have your retail area out front there.
Yeah, let me walk you around a little bit. So this is our new shop that we moved to just a couple months ago. So this is our retail area.
Nice space.
The reed wall. So yeah, we've got tons of, these are jazz saxophone mouthpieces and classical saxophone mouthpieces. And then we've got clarinet mouthpieces and ligatures and everything, and cases and nice big windows. In a couple of weeks, we'll have some practice rooms that are going to sit right here. They've just got to get off the boat from Hong Kong.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so you've got a lot of players coming in and trying out equipment like in that space.
And we haven't done it yet in this space. We moved in here once the pandemic had already started. So before we were in a second-story loft space, and people would come in. I mean, sometimes it would be chaos because we'd have a quartet from OU come in and then a quartet from Texas Tech, and they'd all want to try mouthpieces at the same time. And my wife was in the back trying to work or sleep or something like that, but we had no walls that went all the way up. And we'd have 8 saxophone players playing at the same time, trying to be heard and hear themselves. And it was just chaos. So now we're back in the repair shop area. I've got my bodybuilder dent rod rack.
Nice.
All kinds of.
And then supplies.
Yeah, a lot of shipping supplies, and then extra things like springs and drill bits and shipping supplies and paper towel and all that. And then I've got my little milling machine. I don't have a big one like you guys, but it works for me. And
no, that's fine.
Classic brass, and then a sink to clean stuff. And then something everybody needs is a pet dryer. Works wonders for drying off saxophones and clarinets. I don't have an air compressor here. I just use the pet dryer, and it works way quicker than an air compressor would at drying stuff off. And I give my dog baths in that sink, so it helps to dry her off too.
There you go. Use it for its intended purposes.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah. If this gig doesn't work out, you can just open up a little pet drying business there, a pet cleaning business.
I thought about it. I was like, I would love to open a dog park bar and then have a little pet cleaning thing on the side.
Alcohol and pets is always a good combination.
Yep.
Yep. Hey, are we ready to go live, guys?
I think so.
We are.
Are we ready to start? Okay, let's start. Hey, Tony, if it's all right, before you get into this awesome thing you're going to do, can I just introduce you as best I can quick?
Absolutely.
So I guess the best introduction I can give Tony is like kind of my knowing you and some of the things that I know about you. And well, the first thing is I know that you have an undergraduate degree in music ed, and you have a master's in saxophone performance, which is awesome. That's the same thing I have. So we're living parallel lives. And I think me and you met at an APERT conference many years ago, and you were kind of like a baby then. You were just starting out. Although the beard has kept you timeless. You looked exactly the same. And I remember when I was talking to you, I knew that you were a special guy. You have this kind of down to earth get the job done. This is what I do, and I'm gonna get and no nonsense, just a really no nonsense approach to repair to get it done and do it right. And so I think when I met you, you were working at Meridian Winds at that time, and then we met at a national napper conference. And so, but then after that, Tony, you went on, and you were really just a kid. I mean, you were just starting out kind of in this thing. And then after that, you went on to continue to teach. You've taught at music programs, you've taught repair, you've taught at colleges to teach teachers what to do and what not to do. And you've taught at National Napper Convention. You've shared your trade with a lot of people, and since then, I know me and you have seen each other at many Napper conventions, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out that Tony, folks, I got to tell you the secret about Tony. He gets motion sick. He's got it's a rare thing where his ears are actually on the wrong side. His left ear is on the right side, and he gets motion sick. But even with that, MusicMedic always rents a big bus and has a big party. And we just couldn't have the party without Tony. So we save a seat for Tony on the front. He gets his own reserved VIP seat on the front of every bus, and that's just part of the deal. So Tony goes to all of the MusicMedic parties, even no matter what it takes. We don't care. We don't care if he makes a mess on the bus. So I guess from there, Tony, you worked at the UNT repair shop for a while. And then I'll just fast forward to now. And if there's something you want to kind of tell us about yourself, you have a business. You have a business in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it's called TB Wins. And one of the cool things I think about it is that it's you and your wife are in this business together, and it's really an amazing powerhouse couple, because your wife is a doctorate. It has her doctorate in clarinet. So you have this great player, great repairer, teacher, and then you have on the other side you have a great player and on clarinet, and a very knowledgeable clarinet player. So it's really a lot of knowledge and goodness to go into this one shop. So Dallas-Fort Worth area is definitely lucky to have TB Wins. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Tony, and we're going to take a look at lathes, I guess, today.
Yeah, thank you, Kurt. Yeah, and so that pretty much says everything about me and what we do. At TB Wins, we have tons of mouthpieces and ligatures and reeds that college students and professionals and advanced high school students are going to want to come in and try and spend some time with, or ask myself or Jen, for some feedback about that equipment, and we're happy to provide that. And then on the repair side, we're kind of a one-person shop. I do have a couple of apprentices that come in every now and then. It's been a little slower with the pandemic going on for them. We have a couple of guys that we're training and working with here. But yeah, we're gonna talk about some lathe work, and you can see a little bit of the shop. We were walking around a little earlier, but we have our retail area in the shop, which will have some practice rooms in it shortly. And then we have kind of the machine area, tools and stuff all over. A lot of my lathe tools will live in here, or mill tools. A lot of things I pulled out. It's somewhat organized, but could always be better. I guess it'd be better if I actually showed you what we were looking at. So we're going to talk about one issue that I see a lot, that a lot of places don't correct, or they'll stick a bigger Tenon cork on. And this is a clarinet that's here for a full overhaul. Unfortunately, it's not going to be as fun to watch because all the posts are pulled off, because it's getting replated and everything. But a clarinet, when it's put together, shouldn't really rock back and forth. And this one is going to be hard to see probably on the zoom camera, but the Tenon is full of little chips, and the shoulders are really worn down. And this can happen either from dropping it, or also just normal use is going to wear this away. If you don't keep it as clean as you should, dirt and grit gets in there and it wears things away. The other big thing I see is somebody will take a clarinet apart like that, and you'll see them pull it away, and you'll see one shoulder gets rubbed down and the other still nice and square. And that's all going to make the clarinet rock. And you think, big deal, who cares if it rocks a little bit, but there's a bridge key on the clarinet. And if the clarinet's rocking back and forth, if it rocks one way, the right hand keys won't work. And if it rocks the other, the 1-in-1 B flat, E flat fingering won't work. So this really is an issue that should be corrected. And when we're doing this, we can also improve the way it's going to fit. We can change the lengths of the different shoulders on the tenon. If there's a clarinet player that pulls out a lot, the problem gets worse as you pull out more, so you can extend that upper shoulder and make it a much more secure fit. There's a lot of different ways to hold the clarinet in the lathe. A clarinet like this is really easy to hold in the lathe as long as you avoid the chimneys, because you can put it into the lathe spindle itself. However, most people aren't going to have a lathe spindle big enough like this clarinet. Once I find my chuck key, this clarinet can fit all the way through the bore of my lathe, but most people aren't that fortunate. So what I prefer and what I typically use, as long as the clarinet is free of cracks, and this could be something you guys could whip up in no time in your machine shop, but this is just a little arbor, typically for sanding corks on clarinet mouthpieces. So I just chuck this up in my lathe.
Look how clean it is.
And then the upper joint will fit onto that, and it'll be, just a press fit. When we're turning wood, it doesn't really need to be that tight because the wood is relatively soft, and will turn pretty easy. And then I just bring my tailstock in. And
what's your lathe there, Tony?
I have a Grizzly G4003G, and the G on the end stands for gunsmithing lathe. I don't make guns. That's not for me, but if you do, great. But the reason I love it is because I have an 1.5-inch spindle bore, meaning I can take any material that's 1.5 inches and I can slide it all the way through the spindle of my lathe. If I'm working with longer pieces of material and you don't have that, you either have to cut it to length or figure out something else, because you can't have material sticking out that far in your lathe unsupported. It's never going to give you a good finish. From what I found, the bigger the lathe you can afford and fit in your shop, the better. It's going to be more rigid and secure, and it's going to make working on small parts a lot easier. So that's my lathe.
Cool.
I have all kinds of tooling that you can see. I use a quick change tool post, and I use a lot of carbide inserts. I do have some tools that I do grind, which are going to give me a much better surface finish on brass using high-speed steel. On wood, it doesn't really matter. It's going to come off pretty easy no matter what. So back to my tenon sleeve, you don't want to crank your tailstock too much, because if you do that, you're going to split the clarinet. So I just go until my live center snugs up, and then I get ready to make my first pass.
What's that tooling you're using there?
What's that?
What's the tooling you're using there?
This is just a diamond lathe tool. I could use pretty much any of my left-hand turning tools for this process. It all depends on what shoulder you're working on. And you'll notice I haven't measured anything yet. And the biggest thing I see with people wasting time on the lathe is measuring way too soon and indicating stuff way too soon. I know that this tenon is really worn and chipped away. I could try and measure it, but it's not round. It's not even. Measuring it at this point isn't really going to do me any good. So what I'm going to do is make my first couple passes before I even get out the awesome calipers I bought from MusicMedic to figure out where I am. But at this point, I'm just going to make my first cut.
Just so everybody knows, I've muted it. It's not that his lathe is that quiet. It's just very loud. Zoom picks it up, so he's working on silent mode here.
I love
the
it.
quietest lathe ever.
It makes it very intense.
It does. It does. It's like, what's
This is
happening?
this is very intense, Tony. This is really something.
What's happening? Okay, here we go.
He's doing it. Yeah.
I'm not the he's got a.
Oh, he's getting the calipers.
Hey, Tony, you got to, unmute yourself there. Apparently I can mute you, but I can't unmute you.
Got it. So now I'm at a point where I have a round enough section that I can measure. And I like to measure typically in inches because we're here in America and it makes more sense to me based on how I was educated. Although it gets very annoying in the music world, which is why these calipers are so amazing, because in the US, you have to measure in inches all the time. But when you buy pads, you order them in millimeters. And I'm not very good at converting. So MusicMedic has made it easy and I can just push that one button and all of a sudden I know exactly what I'm doing.
Does all the math for you. It'll even balance your checkbook.
Push of a button.
So
Love it.
Wow.
I know now that I'm at 814. I like to always shoot for 750 when I'm doing Tenon sleeves. The reason I started shooting for 750 is there's another company that makes pre-made sleeves that are bored out to 750. I don't buy those, I make my own, but I figured if it's good enough for them, I mean, it's a nice even number to shoot for. And then when I'm preparing my stock for doing Tenon sleeves, I can use that number to make my life a little easier. So now I know I need to take off about 64 thousandths of an inch. So I'll dial that in.
People love your tool mount, Tony.
Thank you.
I know, I was thinking that too, yeah.
Are we talking about this?
Yes.
Yep.
And that is just a
That's
piece
great.
of 1/8 inch aluminum. And yes, there's going to be a lot of people that are true machinists that are going to call me an idiot for putting my lathe tools up there, getting chips and stuff thrown at them. But I don't care. It works for me. It makes
They're not band techs.
Exactly.
That's right.
All right. So now I'm going to turn this down another 65 thousandths, and we'll go from there.
And again, the lathe is running.
I like him not
wish
muted.
we
I
had-
like to hear the lathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to hear the? Let's see.
Yeah, let's hear it. Let's see how great it is.
Yeah. I can only mute him. He has to unmute himself. We only had like elevator music or like like a toy slide whistle here.
I know Neil is saying we should have elevator music.
Yeah.
Although
yeah,
I
kind of like the intensity. I mean,
it is. It's like we don't know what's going on. Looks like he
I
stopped
appreciate
muting.
how he can get in the lathe zone and then switch back to talking. That's awesome.
That's right. He probably hears us saying all this stuff, so we should probably not talk bad about him.
he's smiling, so he should know. We can't hear
Here
him.
he is. Don't distract him. He's working on his lathe. See there, you can see the chips flying. Yeah, his lathe is a lot cleaner.
So he's
than
cutting
ours.
this down to 750 now, and he keeps checking it in between.
Yeah.
Okay, Tony.
You're gonna have to unmute yourself there.
So
Oh,
now
thanks.
my tenon is at the diameter that I want. It's square, it's even, so I can take it out of the lathe. I always like to pull my tools out first. That way I don't chip it when I'm pulling it out. But I didn't crack the tenon.
That's a good idea.
If you're worried about cracking the tenon, you can always put a hose clamp around it first. If you're really, really worried about it, then don't use my method and just hold it in your lathe chuck. But now I have a small tenon that's ready to receive a sleeve.
Have you ever cracked a tenon, Tony?
Me?
Using this method?
Never.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody told me a long time that I need to use a hose clamp. It's not because I broke a couple.
Oh, right. Yeah. Good.
But I'm pretty sure I've never cracked a tenon doing this, but I've discovered pre-existing conditions. That's what I'm going to tell myself anyhow.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Like the crack was already there. It wanted to be there.
It was there, and
You
when
were
I put
expressing
on the
it.
paper mandrel, it just opened a little.
Right.
They're
But
all
now-
along.
I have a piece of blackwood. A lot of people use hard rubber. I like to use blackwood on wood clarinets, at least for tenons. For tone holes, I don't, because I get worried about end grain and different things going weird on me. But for making a sleeve, I still use blackwood. This is bored out a little bit already, just to save a little time today. I didn't want to bore you to death watching me.
That's
Can you
good.
turn that
That's
camera
good.
down a little bit, Tony, so we can see it when you start cutting?
Yep.
When you do start cutting.
Yeah.
Yep.
So now I've got my boring bar. Sometimes I'll mark depths on there. I'll put a piece of tape and mark depth. On this, I don't really care because I'm going to a measurement that I already know. And if I go too far in, it'll just work for the next one.
And you're using slight pressure with the tailstock on the previous job, Tony?
Enough pressure. You want to make sure you see your live center still spinning, because if the live center is not spinning, it's going to be deflecting. That one on an older clarinet didn't go as smoothly as it usually does, but I was still able to get it there. You saw me adjust the tailstock a couple times because as I was cutting, it was kind of pushing the joint on a little further onto the mandrel, but it didn't crack. If I were to do this clarinet again, I probably would hold it in the chuck instead of on the mandrel. That way I would avoid that problem. But I don't have to do it again. So now I'm going to go ahead and get this board to the right diameter. And that should only just take a minute. Again, I've seen people put their stock in the lathe like this. Let's see.
That's a good angle.
That's a good angle. And throw indicators on it and see exactly where we are. But I know my bore is undersized and I know my outside is oversized. So if I were to indicate that and everything right now, it wouldn't matter. It would just be a waste of time because the first time I take a pass on my lathe, it's now going to be true to my spindle and round. So I'm going to measure off of that because I know I have undersized material. So I'm going to go ahead and make my first pass. And for this, I'm going to use my power feed because I'm not worried about destroying a clarinet joint.
So I've left it unmuted. This is the actual sound of his lathe now.
The silent lathe.
Again, it's so silent.
So he's got the power feed on there, feeding it
Yep,
in.
that's what does it. Yep.
Does he get chips in
Power
his
feed.
beard?
Right.
I want to ask that.
That is a good
He hears you.
question. Yes. Maybe that's
No,
why
this
his
is a
beard is
job that a
black.
lot of people are.
Yeah.
A lot of people are
Full of
nervous
chips.
about doing this job. You know.
This is
Yeah.
a serious job.
Yeah.
Here. He's making it look easy.
Yeah. I don't mean to interrupt your banter with, band repair here, guys.
Right. Keep it down over there.
Yeah. It's like,
Okay. We're checking the ID,
Yeah.
then we're feeding it in again.
Yeah. Yeah, I like his like he says, he turns everything and then he indicates it versus indicating it first and then doing it, Oh.
Am I muted still?
no.
Nope, you're
No, you're
good.
on.
You're good.
Cool. So at this point is where I started going back and forth. When I was learning at Meridian Winds, I learned so much from Gary Beam and Eric Satterley about lathe repair. Gary loved to measure everything, and you cut to exactly what you measure. And when you're a machinist, like that makes a whole lot of sense. Eric liked to just appreciate that you get close to your measurement, and if it doesn't fit, you take another skim pass. You don't even bother looking exactly what the dial is doing because you know you need to go a little more. And that ultimately is a much quicker way to do it than to measure every time and figure it out. I don't know how many times that I've made like a saxophone tenon and receiver and I make them to the exact dimensions and then they don't fit because you got to leave a little bit of room for, like I say, you got to leave a little room for Jesus there. But you got to leave room for oil or dirt or whatever. If you have a exactly 0.500 tenon, it is not going to fit easily into a 0.500 receiver unless you get it perfectly straight up and down and it is perfectly clean. So we can fuss about, I measure and fit to the 10,000th of an inch. But if we do that, we're really kind of just kidding ourselves.
Tony, are you, I'm sorry, Tony, we got a question. Are you, is that the reason you use a boring bit instead of a drill bit for this procedure?
So
what are the
a
pros and
drill
cons?
bit, a 0.7, a 3/4 inch drill bit doesn't drill a 3/4 inch hole. It drills approximately a 3/4 inch hole. You're probably going to be anywhere from 0.740, but more than likely, if you especially are in this industry and you don't like to spend $100 on a drill bit, you're going to drill oversized. So you could sneak up on it, but a boring bar is going to let us get exactly there. Or if you've got, you know, a $10,000 set of reamers that go up to inch, you know, you can probably figure it out. But yeah, most of the time I'm going to use a boring bar. I do use reamers when I make clarinet barrels. I use reamers for a few different things. I start out with a drill bit, and I would have, on this one, I would have probably drilled a 3/8 hole, then a 1/2 inch hole, and then maybe even a 5/8 hole before I switched over to my boring bar. But with wood, you can take off a big enough cut that you're not going to save a ton of time on wood using a drill bit versus just going to your boring bar. So now I have a relatively tight fit. There's a little wiggle, which again, if I were to make this exactly fit perfectly, I wouldn't have any room for glue.
Right.
So now I'm in there, and I don't know, you probably can't see it, but right where I'm meeting here, even in the best of times, there's going to be a little gap. And that's because your tool, when you cut the tenon down, has a little bit of a radius on it. And that's where I go to the world's greatest scraper. And
I love that thing.
And I do it carefully by hand. As long as I don't get hit by the truck, I'm okay. But I'm going to turn the lathe on, and I'm just going to scrape a little radius onto the inside of my bore here. A little chamfer. If I had a chamfer tool, I could do it. But I'm working with wood, and I have the world's greatest scraper, so I'm going to just do it by hand. With other scrapers, that takes hours.
That's right. World's greatest scraper. It is the greatest.
That's great. That's great.
So now I've got to measure my socket to figure out what diameter I'm shooting for here. And that is going to be 863 there, 863 there. Yesterday I did scrape this and true it up just a little bit. That's one thing you do have to be careful of. If your socket is really worn, you've got to true that up before you really can do any measurements. In the saxophone world, it doesn't do any good to make somebody a new tenon when their receiver is bent. So now I know what my target is here. 864. So I'm going to switch over to a different laser tool bit. I could go to high-speed steel and it would give me a better surface finish, but for this wood at my speeds and feeds, it's going to give me a perfectly adequate finish. So that's kind of what I'm going to go with. Again, I haven't measured the outside yet, and I'm not going to measure the outside until after I've made my first pass. Can you see that?
Again, he's running it in whisper mode.
Ryan's all about the audio today.
I am.
Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're doing good, Ryan. Everybody's talking about how good you're doing with this audio stuff.
So yeah, it's all about the highs and the lows. You got to drop the mids.
I'm going to try and get you guys a better angle.
Cool.
Now I know I
Here we
want to go to
go.
864. I've made my first pass, and I'm at 1108. So I know I need to go. And this is the one downside about using a dial or a digital caliper. This is where I'll typically, because I don't like to do the math. I'm at 1110, and I know I'm going to 864. So I've got to go 100. 200, 10, 20, 30, 40, 6. So I've got to go 246, and I didn't have to do any math doing that. If you're more math inclined, you can certainly still use the digital, but the dial works well for people that just like to compare shapes.
Okay, so now we're on our
All about
second
comparing
pass.
shapes. Yeah. We're waiting patiently for the results.
Yeah,
Is this
this is
the third
exciting.
pass?
It is. I see the chips are flying.
Machining never gets old. It's so fun to watch metal or wood be whittled down from
Yeah.
larger pieces of metal or wood. It's great.
How'd you make that clarinet from a larger clarinet?
Yes.
Like that light too. We need one of those.
It's right on the,
It's yeah, it just
the
goes
tool
right
holder,
with it.
right?
Yeah.
Not in the budget.
They're missing.
Yeah.
They're not in the budget. Ah,
No.
we can get the
no.
light. We just can't get the bulb for it. We can get the fixture.
In this process
gotta-
of turning thin-walled wood, am I muted?
You're good.
Nope, you're good.
No,
Cool.
you're good.
In turning thin-walled wood, you want to make sure you're not being too greedy. When I was working at Meridian, Gary liked to just get the job done really quick, and he could do this in half the time it's going to take me. Right now, it's taking me a while because I'm talking and I like to ramble. But he would take off, a 1/4 inch at a time. And if there was any kind of knot or anything in the wood, occasionally it would just kind of explode in the lathe.
Yeah.
Which is why I took 3 smaller passes. But now, before I even move anything, I just like to check, and I have a nice slip fit. And when it's in, there's barely any wobble. So it's a big improvement over where I was. Now I measure the height of my shoulder, or of my tenon. I like to use a nice little skinny parting tool. I do have the bigger insert parting tools that work well, but I find sharpening the little itty bitty ones makes working with wood a lot easier, at least. The big ones have a tendency to splinter a little bit. And again, I could measure exactly how long it is, but I just use that as an indicator or as a template to see how long my tenon was. Then I come over to my workpiece, hold it up against the side. Bring it in until it just touches. And watch it fall. I'm not hitting, so now I know that is the correct length. So now I'm going to slow my lathe down a little bit for the parting.
Boom.
Nice. Parted.
So there is a trick. Never use your finger when you're doing that. I know we're all guilty of parting and having our finger to catch things. I just used a piece of metal. You want something that gives you, especially with a thin wall piece of wood, that gives you a little pressure coming back. If I didn't have that, I'd have all kinds of splinters at the top of that, and I ended up with a pretty clean cut. So my next step is going to be to glue my sleeve in place. And to do that, I use 2 different types of super glue. I don't know if you guys sell the Loctite gel control. You do have the Instacure in like the thick, and I use the MusicMedic Instacure to finish up. But I love the really thick gel super glue, and I put a bead around the bottom.
Whoop.
I almost dropped it.
Never happened before.
A bead around the bottom of the tenon, and what that's going to do is it's going to cure first and it's going to seal it up. So when I feed the thin super glue in from the top, I don't get super glue all over everything. So I have a thin bead of super glue around the bottom. And I just press that in place and I spin it. Just hold it for a second or two. And then I come into my seam along the top with my really thin super glue. Because I left a little bit of space there, I can just watch it wick in. That way, I know I have a nice solid bond. If you're working on a plastic, ABS, or rubber clarinet, I do recommend using epoxy instead of super glue. It's going to hold a little better. A lot of ABS super glue won't stick, so you need to use epoxy. A lot of times when I'm working with a plastic material, I'll also score the tenon and the sleeve. Or if I'm doing a tenon replacement, I'll score the replacement. And usually I like to do it in a crosshatch pattern because I've had it where I just essentially make it look like a thread and somebody has twisted it enough in its plastic that it essentially unthreads itself. But if you do a crosshatch pattern, you get both the adhesion of the epoxy, but also a little bit of a mechanical bond as it fills those crosshatch grooves and it'll never spin or turn or pull off on you.
Cool.
I've seen other people that have done like concentric rings that they just like put little notches in, and I've had those come in and they'll spin and I've had to cut those off and start over. So now I have a sleeve on there that is at the right diameter. So I'll just have to mount this into my lathe and put a cork groove on it. Do you want to watch me do that, or how are we doing on time?
Let's watch it.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Do you want to see some more lathe stuff? Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this is kind of the fun part where you can make your life a lot easier depending on what tenon you're starting with. I don't know how much clarinet work you guys end up doing, but I do a lot. And on a lot of buffet clarinets and different models of clarinets, the groove for the tenon cork is the exact width of my ruler. And whenever that happens, I love it because then you don't have to measure anything. You just lay your ruler in the groove and you're like, awesome. I'm just going to, pop this in there, sand it down, and we'll be good. You don't have to measure anything. Like the less measuring you have to do, I find the better.
Tony, while you're getting set up to do that, we've got a question. How do you do the cross hatching?
What's that?
How do you cross hatch when you were talking about that?
I do it either with a scraper or with what I call a pokey thingy, which is a needle spring and a pin vise. It doesn't have to be deep. You just want a little bit of depth there. I wouldn't waste the time doing it with a jeweler's saw, although I've thought about it. Yeah, I usually just scrape it in.
Gotcha. Cool. Now, can you move that down a little more when you get a second?
Yep. I need it out of the way so I don't hit it with my chuck key.
Gotcha.
So this time I'm going to actually just load the other tenon up in my headstock, in my chuck, and I'm going to use it this way. Now I know it's not going to slide out at all on me. And for this, I am going to use my insert parting tool just because it's a lot wider. And the depth on this doesn't really matter other than you want to not go too deep because I like to use the thinner tenon cork. Most people carry a thin tenon cork and a thick tenon cork that you use for sax necks. Using the thin stuff is just going to compress less because there's less there to compress, if that makes sense. So I don't like to cut my grooves too deep, just deep enough.
Move that camera down when you talk. Oh, yeah. Nice.
So the thin is probably 3/64 of an inch, and maybe the thick is the 1/16 of an inch for cork.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That's what he's talking about. 1/16 or 3/64. Yep.
And I guess that was the quick and easy part. I do go back around. I guess I'll show that because that's quick and easy. You end up with a little bit of cured super glue right there. You can see that ridge on the bottom. I use my cork scraper and I just go through and I scrape that off. And then depending on how close you finish to the end, you're gonna go, I usually just go in on flat sandpaper and just knock that little bit of super glue off that I have. You can kind of see it there.
Yeah.
I'll just go in on a piece of sandpaper and knock that off. But now I have a clarinet joint that doesn't wobble at all, or maybe a touch, but way better than it was. And the shoulders are in good condition, ready for another 50 years of service.
Nice.
Very nice.
So when I'm not talking, and I like to ramble a lot, when I'm not talking, this is a job that usually takes 15 to 20 minutes, plus putting on a tenon cork. It's one that I do quite a bit when there's wobbly tenons. I also do a lot of tenon replacements, but a tenon sleeve is a relatively easy one to kind of get started with on lathe work. The things you want to remember are you don't want to crack the joint, and you don't want to lose a finger.
Oh yeah,
We need those.
So,
we do.
so Tony, you're doing these for people. People can send you their clarinet if it has a broken tenon as well. I mean, obviously you're teaching us how to do it and showing our friends out there how to do it. But like, if someone was watching and they have a broken tenon, they just throw that baby into a box and ship it over to you.
Yeah, I do that. Then there's a few great places in the country to do it. Meridian Winds being one of them, but I learned from the best, and I do it pretty much the same way that I learned how to when I was working there. So I'm certainly happy to help anybody with anything like that they want to send me.
Cool. And you can do a clarinet, a soprano clarinet, a bass clarinet.
Yep. My lathe is big enough I can do a contrabass clarinet, and I have center steady rests and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, we can take on pretty much anything.
Cool.
Do you
Cool. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah.
I think we have is there a question from Leroy there on the 2-foot lines where
Yeah,
the tenon cord? Go ahead, Rich. You can read better than me. I'm not so good with this reading thing.
Tony, do you put do you score the tenon cork notch
groove?
that you made? Yeah.
No, I don't do that because that is done, and that was done on clarinets when we use shellac, because you need more surface area for shellac. I find in my work that when I have those grooves and somebody likes to oil their clarinet a lot, the oil works its way in there and the clarinet, the corks peel off a lot quicker. In my experience, the corks that tend to stick the best are the ones that are on a clean, flat groove. However, in different parts of the country, that might be different. But no, I don't score that because I use contact cement and not shellac. And contact cement works better when there's more contact, where shellac, you need the grooves so that there's a little bit of extra adhesive to cure if you just need to have room for that. That, I know I have seen some pictures that there are people that disagree with me on that. But yeah, I do not score them and I don't have any problems with my corks coming on.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks, Tony. That was great, and I think all inclusive. That's a really nice thing to watch, to see you start from a broken tenon and get all the way to a full-on repair right here on the video. We've had a few people on, and it's always interesting to see how confident people are working in front of the camera and getting the job done. And it's clear that you've done this like a million times.
Yeah. So
yeah. So thank you. Thanks for coming out here today. And I guess we can say goodbye now. And thanks to everybody. Thanks to you, Rich and Ryan, for being here, and you, Tony, and to everybody out there watching. Thanks for watching, and to my parents, to Rich's parents, to everybody. Thanks everyone for getting our thing here, and thanks for coming out and seeing us. We'll see you next Wednesday on a Wednesday Wisdom.
Thanks, Tony.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody awkwardly wave. Awkwardly wave, everybody.
Okay, awkward with.
All right.
All right. See ya.